Yes, construction workers and availability of labor is a challenge we're facing, which is why we continue to have ambitious immigration targets, why we continue to make sure that we see the growth of Canada as a good thing.
You wonder why you can't afford a home? Well, there's your answer right there. Because Justin Trudeau named Sean Fraser, due to his ability to generate media puff pieces and do photo ops, rather than make housing affordable.
Well, the Trudeau government has spent the past 6 months or so rolling out one housing announcement after another, racing to meet cross-country concerns over supply and affordability amid a housing crisis. Will that remain a top focus this year? In all likelihood, yes. But the latest today, the Prime Minister there responding to reports in the Canadian press that his government was warned back in 2022 that increasing the amount of immigration would strain Canada's housing supply. Remember, we have seen a surge in newcomers arriving by the hundreds of thousands in recent years, and they all need housing, of course. Now, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre there promising he would tie immigration targets to housing availability to try and ease the housing crisis. Let's bring in the front bench on this Friday Sabrina Grover, a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's now a principal at Shakti Strategies. Melanie Paradis was the communications director for former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. Former Ontario NDP MPP Guradan Singh. He's now the vice president at Crestview Strategies and the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And in Ottawa, there she is, CTV News Digital parliamentary reporter, our very own Rachel Aiello. Okay, Mel, I'm going to start with you on this one. Housing getting political, whether it's too much too soon, can we handle it? What do you make of what Pierre Poilievre is saying?
Well, I think it's a fantastic and thoughtful announcement, and it's actually quite the departure from the rhetoric that we've been hearing really for years about immigration and really for generations, the way in which Canadians have talked about immigration. The reality is it is not humane to bring people into Canada when there isn't housing for them, simply. And so tying immigration to our ability to build housing, I think, is a really smart way to balance and to incentivize, frankly, building. So we want to bring in more people to Canada? Great. Let's build more houses so that they have places to live, and so that people who are growing families here have places for their children to live as well. Everyone can prosper if we responsibly grow our immigration targets based on housing.
Sabrina, what's your read on what Pierre Poilievre has said and these announcements by the Trudeau government? Whether you think that we can handle all of these arrivals, or as Mel is saying, is it unfair to bring them in when we're in the middle of a housing crisis?
I think it's really interesting when we talk about immigration to think about all of the information that the government is receiving, right? So yes, on the one hand, we know that we're in a housing crunch. We know we've been in a housing crunch for several years. But on the other hand, we have reports coming out of the Business Council of Canada from 2022 that say we need more immigrants coming to this country because there's a labor shortage. And we also have businesses that have committed to helping newcomers settle in, find housing, and become accommodated in Canada. And so I think it's really challenging to blame this the entire immigration piece only on the government, right? Like, there's a lot of folks who are looking for immigrants to come to this country, and there's things that we can do to improve the housing piece, but just to say that, we want to stop immigration is not necessarily the best approach. I think to Mel's point, and to what Pierre has said, we do need to build housing, and the government has focused on building housing since it got into government. We need to wait for those investments from 2022, 2023 to settle in and see how much progress we've made. And I think the government continues to invest. We've seen Sean Fraser continue to go out to cities, continue to build partnerships and invest, directly with municipalities. And we need some time for those investments to actually carry out and get the housing built.
To Guradan, this link between the arrival of hundreds of thousands of people to Canada, the housing crisis, and what Pierre Poilievre is proposing. Let's tie the two together and make sure that they work in sync in a better way.
So let's start off by saying that we do need immigration in Canada. And this is actually not about immigration. This is about a failed Liberal policy where they've had 8 years to ensure we have affordable homes. And they're investing in the building of homes, treating housing like an essential infrastructure that it is, and they haven't. And what happens is when you fail to invest in these crucial areas like housing, then ultimately those who are marginalized and need support end up taking the blame. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing this shift in rhetoric, which is effectively blaming immigration, despite the fact that we have a shortage in labor, we have an aging population, we need immigrants to keep our economy moving. I also want to make note that I do find it important that we call out Mr. Pierre Poilievre for the fact that he was in government, and under his watch, we lost 800,000 affordable homes that the government had direct impact on. That has been attributed to one of the reasons why we're in such a huge housing crisis right now, something that the federal government had direct purview and jurisdiction on. So his hands are not clean either. Ultimately, we're seeing a bad system under the Conservatives and a continuation of that bad system under the Liberals. They've had 8 years and they have yet to get this crisis under control.
Yeah, and to Rachel Aiello as well. And obviously this is a challenge for Pierre Poilievre, not wanting to be seen as anti-immigration. He often talks about the fact that he's married to an immigrant. His wife is an immigrant. At the same time, though, seeing that the Trudeau government, Rachel, is vulnerable on the housing crisis.
I think what's really interesting about what the conversation turned to today, Todd, was in the minister's statement from Fraser and Miller talking about the need to stabilize immigration. This kind of piqued my ear because this is the same word, Todd, they use when talking about grocery prices. We're not talking about lowering, we're not talking about raising, we're talking about stabilizing. And so what that actually means in practice, I think is going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. Certainly, I mean, it's not a novel concept that immigration and housing and the need for there to be places for people to stay. It's not a new concept. It's something the government has been faced with for a number of years. The challenge here is either on both sides, the Liberals or Conservatives. They can promise to build housing, they can promise to do things, but realistically, Todd, it takes time to build these homes, and practically speaking, by the time the next election comes, it's not going to be a market difference where we've got, thousands more Canadians moving into places, these strawberry box homes that the government has promised.
Does it resonate, do you think, Mel, with voters, though, when Poilievre says, look, we should use immigration targets that are linked to the housing issue?
I think it absolutely does, because it's the only policy approach so far that has been a tangible, immediate action that can be taken by the government. The Prime Minister said today that there's no magic solution, and he's not wrong. When it comes to housing, a lot of these initiatives are going to take time for Canadians to be able to see the benefits of it. So in order to take that time, one of the things that we have, one of the tools that we have available to us is to slow down immigration a bit so that it's manageable. People aren't just arriving here and ending up we're living out of a homeless shelter, which is what we're seeing in Toronto. People are flying into Pearson and they have nowhere to go. And it takes weeks for them to find anything. They're living in multiple families in housing that's meant for one family, maybe meant for one person. It's completely inhumane what we're allowing to happen in this country. And so the only tool really that we have is to be able to just slow this down a bit, so until we can get to a place where we start to see the benefits of the programs that have been put in place and see availability start to open up a bit more.
Sabrina, does it risk scapegoating immigrants?
I definitely think that there's a risk to that, but I want to pick up on what Grattan said about the affordable housing piece in particular. And I think that one of the conversations that we need to continue to have at all levels of government is the investments between market housing and affordable housing, and the ways in which I think, for a long time, provincial governments, including Conservative governments across this country, have actually cut investments in affordable housing. And so you can build homes and you can see like luxury condos go up, but that's not affordable. That's not for everybody. And so I think there has to be investment into the affordability of housing, which is so key for folks like immigrants, the marginalized, lower socioeconomic populations. And so I think you also have to look at what provinces have done. And I know you were talking to Minister Nixon earlier. And for some reason, the Alberta government's afraid of calling this an emergency, but at the same time, the Conservatives are blaming and saying that we don't have enough housing. So it's interesting to see where are the provinces on this, where are their investments, where are their supports, and how are they actually going to build affordable units in their own cities.
It's obvious, Grattan, that the Trudeau government realizes it has a problem on its hands, and that's why we're seeing, week after week, these announcements in different municipalities, coast to coast to coast. What do you think we're going to see this year?
I don't know what we're going to see, but I'll tell you what we need to see. We need a wartime effort to address this housing crisis in Canada. We need there to be a really focused priority on housing, which is not just announcement after announcement, but actually saying we're going to treat this like the crisis that it is. We have been here before as a nation. Post World War II, we had a huge influx of individuals, and the government acted decisively and built houses en masse across the board. We have that ability with our government now, and not just building any kind of housing, but deeply affordable housing, which the reality is not something which is just limited to people in lower socioeconomic levels. The housing crisis is so bad that you have households of professionals with 2 earning individuals that still cannot afford decent housing in this country. This is a crisis in the most complete sense of the word, and we need a wartime effort. Instead of scapegoating immigrants, instead of hurting our economy by preventing the influx of more individuals that our economy needs, let's put our focus where it should be on building affordable homes.